have the memo included in the documents that we have. It's unfortunate because we could have read that. But I guess I'm surprised that the disciplinary action was not more severe. And this is what boggles the mind. It just doesn't make any sense to me and to anybody else. Truthfulness to me is above everything else. If you don't have that, you don't have any trust. And I just can't understand why that carries. And it's not that I'm looking for a greater punishment, but why that did not occur. It just doesn't make any sense to me if that's what you thought.
Commissioner, those are decisions that are made above my level. I sent this memo forward for whatever they deemed to take, and they took the course of action of an internal affairs investigation. It has nothing to do with me other than writing this memo, authoring the memo. Yes, sir?
I've got a question. You indicate that he violated the rules and regulations, section 6, required conduct.
Which one are you reading, sir?
I'm reading December 23rd, 2008, personnel records entry form.
Okay, we're going back to that one. I'm just curious because I don't have that with me again. So the 23rd, sir?
Yeah, which one were we on?
Well, we're talking about this grievance, and I was explaining that the process went with the 0907. I didn't know what you were referring to.
Okay. I'm referring to the 23rd.
Yes, sir.
08.
Yep.
He's charged with required conduct, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll give you a copy of this.
May I just take a quick peek at it? Is that be okay?
Because you don't have it. And what I'm interested in is, you charge him with required conduct. Where does it indicate in the body of your narrative here that substantiates the required conduct violation? If you can do that for me, that would be great.
Good catch. Required conduct, submitting reports. I think it's very clear.
Could you hang on, please, a second? I apologize.
Go ahead, sir. I apologize.
Are you looking for me to substantiate each one of the charges, sir, that I listed on here?
Yes. That's my ultimate goal, is to see in your narrative and substantiate each charge that was brought forward.
Are you looking for me to read the, I mean, if I go down through it and I read the whole thing to you, it's pretty clear to me.
Well, why don't you make it clearer by telling me which one is required conduct?
Okay.
What is it that he did or said in your narrative?
Actually, yes, sir, if I may. Subsection, it says section 6, required conduct. That's only a section. Subparagraph A16 is what I'm saying that he violated. Required conduct is just a title, sir, for that section.
All right, let me see if I'm following on the same page here.
Yeah. So you have required conduct, and then they have subparagraphs for that. I cited specific subparagraphs that he violated, in my opinion.
Okay, subparagraph A16.
Yes, sir. Submitting reports.
Okay. Truthfulness, A17.
Yes, sir. A17.
Okay.
And then section 7, subparagraph 14, which is neglect of duty.
Okay, so can you humor me and show me where in your narrative that the required conduct is one section, right?
Yes, sir.
And under that of subparagraphs.
Yes, sir.
All right, so submitting reports, A16.
If you excuse me, I'm just reading through it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you may even covered a couple of the paragraphs already, Commissioner. I spoke to you when you turned in this report, and you stated that you had received the report on 12/11. As you thought it might be important to advise me of the incident, because the date that it was filed, I believe, was the 19th. If I look at the report. And why it hadn't been referred, had not been submitted. I also put down, I also said that the fact that, was he aware of the reports in that one paragraph that you'd already cited, sir, on the evening of the 16th? Okay, and that he was aware of the report, he had not even completed it yet?
Right. That's the one he was working on? Said he was
It's the one that the assault for, yes.
Were you working on that at the time? Did you?
What was the date? When was the time frame?
It would have been after the 16th meeting with the commissioners.
On the 16th, that's when, as I gave it back to you, that's when I went into my office and reviewed what Commissioner McHugh had read. The school's policy on the assault.
The agreement, the memorandum?
Memorandum, yes. And at that time, that's when I determined that it didn't need a report. After speaking to the principal, at that time, after I worked on it on the 16th, I determined it didn't need one. And then on the 19th, after the information I told you about Sergeant Carney and what he had told me they did, I decided on my own to complete the report on the 19th and then to turn it in. When I turned in the report, just to clarify, on the 19th, when I turned in the report, and I talked to Lieutenant Klein when I turned that in, he had the same information he had on the 23rd on the 19th. The fact that they're saying new information came out for the IA. I said the same thing to him on the 19th, the day I turned the report in. And those same dates of the 11th, that they're the 16th, that they're saying were involved in the report, those dates didn't change. So they had my report to review and the information I gave them when I submitted it to them. 4 days later, they give me the 5-day suspension. Then they come back to review it again. Those dates didn't change. The dates were the same. They had that information when they gave me the first 5-day suspension. If they didn't review it carefully enough to see that there were issues with the report, why should they be able to readdress the report 7 months later to see if they could find more charges? That's what was the issue. They had all that information. It wasn't new information that came out.
Lieutenant Klein, can you continue?
Yes, sir.
Please. So you're indicating that on the 16th, that was the reason for submitting reports or violating the submission of reports?
Submission reports further on, actually, Commissioner, on the second page of this write-up, it refers specifically to the comparison of someone being physically assaulted in a cell phone incident involving sexually explicit material involving a juvenile is equally important. The rest of that was, you neglected to neither inform me of the assault incident nor complete a report on it until 8 days later.
Was he asked to complete a report on it 8 days later?
He knew the report was out there.
Who did it?
He did the report.
When did he turn it in?
I didn't get it until 8 days later.
But when did he turn it in? When did you turn it in?
On the 19th. I was
The
ordered out of the
assault occurred on the
school.
11th.
I didn't get back into
Sorry.
I didn't get back into the school until the 16th. So the fact that it was 8 days late was because I was ordered out of the school on the 11th, returned on the 16th.
So wait a minute, you were out of the school on the 11th.
That's when they ordered me out of the school.
So for 5 days, you weren't in school? You weren't working?
That's not in the schools. There was an ice storm, so the schools were shut down. It wasn't until the 16th that I got back to the schools.
There was an ice storm,
Yes.
and the school was closed. What day of the week was?
It was a Tuesday. The 16th was a Tuesday. So Thursday was when I was ordered out. That was the last day school was open. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday was ice storm. Tuesday was when I first got back.
Thursday, the 11th was a Thursday? I
Yes.
mean, the 11th was a Thursday?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And one thing I'd just like to touch on, it wasn't just that I was ordered out of the school. When I got back to the PD, I was also ordered out of the police department.
What do you mean?
When I was at the police department, Lieutenant Klein knew what I was working on. If there was some memo out there that says we're supposed to have a conversation about reports that are due or safe school reports, why is it that the second that he comes to me, there's no discussion? I explain in there with the hands around my neck and how you answer this question determines which way I twist my hands. Are you still on the clock? And when I said no, he said, get out of the station before Detective Captain Cecilio finds out.
Who was present at the time of that?
There was, I know Sergeant Matakis was in the room. There was a couple other officers in the room, but they no longer work here either.
Lieutenant Klein, is that accurate information he's presenting?
It is not. I had no time to put my hands around officers. That this came up in the grievance, and I'm going to state it emphatically again, that I at no time did that. I patted his shoulder and joked with him, but I at no time said I was going to choke him or make the inference of that, and I take offense to that.
But you were joking with him about...
I asked him that you're not on my time because you're going to get me in trouble, you need to leave. That was the way that whole thing went down.
So you knew that he had... Why did he have to leave? I'm a little confused. Why did he have to leave?
I was told by my supervisor that...
No overtime?
No overtime.
And what day was that, do you think?
Must have been a Wednesday or a Thursday.
It was a Thursday.
Well, I mean, what was the date, do you think?
That was the 11th.
It was the 11th when the sexual assault, the sexual, not assault, the sexual texting, the sexting.
So on the 11th, you told him that there was no overtime?
And he had
I don't recall telling him that there was no overtime. I specifically said, you need to go. I can't have you being here. I've been told.
Well, how is it that you need to go and you need to produce the report? How does that work for you, that you're going to get it done if you need to go?
He made no mention of the assault report is what we're discussing right now. We're not talking about the sexting case. He made no mention of the assault report that day to me at all.
I wasn't afforded the opportunity to make that. Like I'm telling you, I sat there, I came to the station, I sat down at the computer, and that's when I was told to leave before Captain Cecilio found out that I was still there.
What would happen if Captain Cecilio found that you were still in?
I don't know. I had already told him I wasn't on the clock, and that I wasn't doing work-related things.
You told him you were on the clock or
Off the clock. When he said that, are you still on the clock? I said, no, I'm not. I'm just working on some things.
Did he tell you he was not on the clock, Lieutenant?
I don't recall him saying that.
Okay.
And to be clear, he was sitting at a computer terminal at the police department doing something on the computer terminal using our in-house record system. You're not off the clock when you're coming in there sitting down doing work.
Could he do it for free, though?
No.
He can't?
No.
He can't donate his time to the police department?
That's not what...
There are plenty of officers that wrap up their reports.
Hang on. If he wanted to stay and complete that report and not collect overtime for it, he couldn't do it?
My understanding of the federal law is no, you cannot volunteer your time to do your basic job.
Do everything.
Let's take a break for 5 minutes.
Can I bring this back to you, Commissioner?
Please.
We appreciate your patience. Okay.
Chief, I'm going to ask you, what did Officer Defina do for which he was disciplined in July? What did he do that he was disciplined?
You're talking the 0906 grievance?
The one that was in...
The one that says date, time of event, July 3rd, 2009?
Yeah. Was it because he said he was working on it the whole time? Was it December? Yes, I'm sorry, that's December.
December 11th.
Yeah.
It's the December 11th one.
I don't have the December 11th one. I only have the two that we have been dealing with since the last meeting, that were the two grievances originally.
Which is December 11th incident, 2008, is that correct?
I have
Captain Daigle, is that what we're talking about here, these incidents? One of them is 2008, December 11th, 2008?
I think December 11th is the incident. I think when it says date, time, event, December 19, I think that's when we found out about it.
Again, Captain Daigle.
Yes.
One of the incidents that we're talking about is December 11th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and Commissioner, you were asking about which one?
The one in July, the one that he was disciplined for in July, which I think is 06, 0906. The one that he was disciplined for in July. What was he disciplined for? What did he do to receive the discipline? Or what didn't he do?
This was the one where the Sergeant Dupree had sent the memo in about following up on that report of the drugs.
All right, what is it, why was he disciplined? What is it that he was disciplined for?
I think the easiest way, instead of reading the whole thing, is just read the first page of that, and the last two paragraphs talks about completing reports, understanding laws, unwillingness to properly proceed with criminal investigations, and then the last of the direct violation rules and regulations, section Roman 7, prohibited conduct, subparagraph 11, B and C, incompetence.
So the ultimate charge is he was being incompetent, or is incompetent.
In this situation. That's the way I take that's the way I read it.
All right, can you explain what he did?
Again, I would either say read what's in that or ask Sergeant Dupree, who laid it out last time, exactly what happened.
Well, when I read it, we have some redaction. So I'm not sure why we have a redaction, because this says, it outlined a chain of events in which he reviewed, meaning Sergeant Dupuy, I guess, reviewed case number 373004 regarding the alleged blank at College School.
Correct.
What is the alleged, what's the blank? Why is that redacted?
It was redacted because of what the situation was, so that somebody theoretically couldn't reverse engineer and figure out what had happened on that date and who the students were. But I believe it's been discussed since where the term has come out that it was drugs. So I believe that has come out during testimony already.
Well, here's the unredacted version.
Why is mine all redacted, yours is unredacted? Yours like this? In the package I got from, I believe from HPD, mine is all redacted.
Commissioners, if it helps, I had Captain Daigle bring what was actually in the personnel file, so these are unredacted if you want. Nope. You can look at this again.
Well,
He's just comparing it to the fact that mine is unredacted.
Okay, no, I don't know. But again, as you look at it, this is the issue that Sergeant Dupree explained the last time we were here.
yeah,
And that's the fake drug one.
the problem that I have though is problem that I have is when I'm reviewing the evidence that's presented, everything that I get to review is redacted to the point where I'm having a hard time making heads or tails.
That's a 7-3.
I don't either. That's what's... I'm really looking at your second page here, so that's important.
Yeah, I'm giving my whole packet.
Well, the problem is now that I'm going to try to fill in the blanks. Once you go... Why would this be, simple things are being redacted here?
Chief, can I ask you to give the unredacted ones to Commissioner Corllian? And you can set that one aside. If you would, please, if you have an unredacted one.
I believe we do. I believe we have what was in the personnel file, the originals. Not sure which one you want. Some of the policies at least were that way because they came out of the file.
Oh, I understand. Okay, I understand this, but these are two separate.
Right,
Yes.
the two we're talking about.
The two of them that we're talking about. This is the December 11th, and this is the July 3rd, I believe. Yes, that's the 3rd, and that's December 11th.
But can you see where I have a problem with all this redaction? I got a whole page that's redacted there.
Right, but we shouldn't do this. I think just the way it's-
Can we set this one aside? Does that work for
Let
you?
me make sure I don't have all my notes.
Okay.
Go ahead. Once you straighten this out, please. Okay. So we can be on the
With
same
regard
page.
to, let's go to the December 11th one. And I guess I'd ask you, Chief, what did Officer... I have this as the 11th. Okay, what did Officer Defina do for which he was disciplined in July?
That was a 2-day suspension, drop down on verbal reprimand. Sorry? No, not according to this.
No. The 2-day suspension that was dropped to the verbal reprimand had to do with the issue with the memo that Detective Sergeant Dupree had written. The issue that was the remedial training and written reprimand had to do with the inaccurate information in the report written about a December 11, 2008 incident at Carly Middle School.
That's what we need to look at.
Would you please repeat the last part of that sentence that you said, that last statement?
The one we're looking at, if I'm reading you right, the 0907, on the top, on the first page, it says date of event December 19, 2008. That was remedial training and written reprimand. And on the second page of that, it says this personnel records entry form results from Officer Jason Defina's inclusion of inaccurate information in a written report about a December 11, 2008 incident at Carly Middle School involving and it was blacked out between 2 school students, which we already discussed earlier.
And for the charges for the December 19th is the truthfulness, is that correct? Which is the written reprimand and the remedial training, is that correct?
I believe so. The best way to answer that is for
Well,
you to
I'm
read
looking
this.
at the form that says personal records entry form, and the date and time of the event is December 19th, 2008.
Correct.
And it says employee notified of action on July 15, 2009. And the recommendation is both remedial training and written reprimand, and it's signed by you, the chief. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then when you go to the next page, page 2, it has an introduction, information review,
Right.
facts. Page 3 goes on with the facts, and then page 3 and then 4 go into conclusion. So
Yes, I see the conclusion.
I guess
Yeah.
to answer your question, I guess I would say if you read the 4 pages in order, it talks about what Lieutenant Klein was talking about earlier, not notifying a supervisor.
Inaccurate, inserted inaccurate dates, placing inaccurate information in his written report, conduct unbecoming incompetence. Is that correct?
Say if that's what you're reading from, yes. Again,
Okay.
the best way is
This
to
is
read the
December.
4
I'm
pages.
reading the documents that was provided by the department.
Right.
And then section 6, required conduct, subsection 16, submitting reports,
Yes,
and subsection 17, truthfulness.
yes. I believe that's what Lieutenant Klein was talking about earlier.
Now, with regard to this one, okay, he was disciplined in July, okay, it was for that, or was it because he said he was working on the report the whole time? Which was it?
The one we just talked about?
The one we just had a conversation with, that I just went through.
It says it on page 2, results from his inclusion of inaccurate information in a written report about a December 11, 2008 incident.
All right, give me specifics about that, please. What is it that he did?
If you go to page 2, the bottom, it has the facts. It has the story laid out there.
I don't want you to tell me what it is.
Okay, well, it says that the following information, it says Roman 3 facts, the following information has been acknowledged by Officer Defina and it does not appear to be in dispute. On December 11, 2008, Officer Defina was working as a school resource officer at the Collie Middle School. That afternoon, school authorities informed Officer Defina that there had been what we know now as a fight between 2 students early in the afternoon. Officer Defina, aware that this fight had involved 2 students of color, is basically what that is. December 17th, there was another incident between the same 2 students in which the 2 students had the altercation, which the lieutenant explained earlier.
But was
that had to do with Facebook.
Defina made aware of that? This says on December 17th, there was another incident, right, between the same 2?
That's
So
what it
a
says
week
in
later,
there.
there's another incident. What does that have to do with Officer Defina if there's another incident?
If I remember right, and double check with Captain Cecilio, was when we learned of the Facebook incident and the detectives were sent to the school, that is when, my understanding is that's when they first learned of the incident occurring on the 11th. So my general understanding, and the other staff can give you more details, was we are notified of a situation, we go to handle the situation, and the detectives learn that there's prior history and what the history was. And then we backtrack as a department and go, well, where's the report on the prior incident between the 2? And that's where this all led to.
Okay, can I ask you, I think earlier this evening, Officer Defina was talking about when the texting issue happened and this issue happened, that he had conversations with Detective Sergeant Pinardi. Does Detective Sergeant Pinardi have any responsibility as far as his communication with Officer Defina?
I can't answer for Detective Sergeant Pinardi. I don't know what the level of the discussion was. I don't know if Sergeant Pinardi had a conversation with Lieutenant Klein and Captain Cecilio. He may have or he may not. They would have to answer that. So I guess it depends on what the content of the conversation between Officer Defina and Sergeant Pinardi was, and I don't know what that content was.
I guess what concerns me is the fact that it seems as though there were a lot of different people that knew of these incidents that happened at the school. First of all, Officer Defina has a conversation with Detective Pinardi, Detective Sergeant Pinardi, about what's going on at the school, not probably necessarily about that incident. There's another conversation that happens with regard to whether or not the officer has to leave the school, and then you see in these records here, these personnel records entry form, that there's another incident that happened on December 17th, and I guess I'm just wondering what the department has to say to all of that. Are you holding the officer responsible for reporting all of this as well as the December 17th?
I guess I'm not going to guess for somebody else. I'd refer you back to the testimony by Lieutenant Klein earlier of the memo he wrote, and
see, and that's the problem. We don't have a copy of that memo, and you know, there were packets that were given to us, but we're kind of missing some of the detail that would certainly help us.
I understand. And again, that information is in the internal investigation. If that would help you, you know, we can get that to you.
The memo is part of the, is the memo going to compromise anything that?
I'll let Captain Day will look at that.
Is the memo going to compromise any of the deliberation here this evening? Like I said, I'm surprised we don't have the memo. I can see that with regard to the internal investigation, but with regard to the memo,
I don't believe it would.
I'm just wondering why we were not provided it. Chief?
Initially, we weren't going to go to the internal investigation and try to pull out different parts. We didn't know obviously what questions you would be asking, so you got the initial, you know, the copies of the grievances you did, and then you gave them to me, and we brought the internal investigation. Certainly, the commission has the ability to read the whole internal investigation, but we wouldn't know what to pull out of there, if you will. That wouldn't be, I don't think, fair to try to pull out what may or may not answer your questions.
Why isn't it not included? On number 3, it says internal affairs and investigation material related to the IA, it's a number, and it lists what some of the things are, right? But it doesn't give specifics to back up what you're talking about here, about the discipline. What is it in, this one's dated July 15th, okay? And it makes reference back to December 11th incident. And this is in July. But yet you have the information that's reviewed. It says an IA was conducted, and there's material related to witness interviews, memoranda, and copies of the written reports submitted by the officer.
If you will, when you look, for better or worse, if you look at the middle section of the personnel records entry form, no matter which one you look at, it says narrative, and it says in this section briefly describe the event that led to the action. In case of disciplinary action, list the number, title, or section of the RSA or policy violated and include a brief description of the violation. Do not include investigative detail. Administrative investigations and citizen complaint investigations are confidential in nature and are filed separately from this form. You supplement the sheets
You're
if
talking about
necessary.
the ALM? That's what you were saying?
No, what I'm saying is if you read the instructions that are on this personnel entry form, it talks about basically briefly summarizing in this form what's happened, and then if you need to, anybody needs to go back and look at the details,
Right.
You then go back to the IA or whatever, or especially if it came from an IA, obviously you go back and you would look at the complete IA,
Yeah.
and that would fill in the gaps, but this is not meant to be
I can
a
appreciate
word by
that.
word of this.
I can appreciate that, Chief, but I guess what I'm thinking is that you've used or you've cited, and several people this evening within the command staff have cited different parts of the IA, okay, that was done to speak to your argument. However, you leave out the memo, and I don't understand why. I see what you're saying with regard to the narrative and what it says, but I don't know why you didn't provide, a copy of the memorandum. It kind of, leaves us at a loss.
Well, the way it normally works is you start with the personal records entry form, and then if there's questions from that, you would go to the entire IA. The department wouldn't try to pull out sections from the IA.
But
to
But that's
discuss
what you're
this.
doing this evening,
Well-
aren't you? You're using the IA, you're using...
Well, so that we can answer your questions.
Okay, but isn't on page 3 of the July 15, 2009 records entry form, isn't that the same information and the same accusations that were made back on December 23rd's discipline? About not notifying the supervisor? It seems to me to be the same.
I guess my best answer would be is I would go back to what Captain Daigle said much earlier, which is it's very close, but it was not looked at as the same event on the part of Officer Defina.
Captain, what is the difference that brought these charges? What came to light that brought these charges about the same incident back on December 11th that he received discipline for, and now that there's new information that came about that he got more discipline for the same things that he did or did not do in the December 23rd one? What differentiates these two? Is there a distinct difference?
The only difference is the information that came to light on December 23rd, when he was given that write-up, and then the discussion ensued. That is the only new information.
And, right. Where is that being shown in the discipline on these personnel record entry forms? That's what I need to know, Chief.
That level of detail would be in the internal investigation and wouldn't be in here.
And based on what he told Lieutenant Klein on the 23rd of '09, based on what he told him, that, of '08, December 23rd of '08, based on that information, that's what prompted an internal investigation?
I'm sorry, I'd like to just, I'd like to just ask Captain Daigle to respond back to the first half of what we were just saying before your question.
Okay.
To go further with your question, the information that I referred to that came to light on December 23rd is not contained in the write-up.
Which record? The 23rd one?
No.
Obviously not.
No,
It would have been
the one in
the
July
subsequent one in July.
is not contained in there. It is my recollection that the truthfulness issue that I was looking into that happened from the 23rd write-up is not included in the July write-up as far as the truthfulness issue.
Are you saying that there's possible outstanding charges for untruthfulness?
No, I'm not saying that.
I don't understand.
My understanding is, in mine IA, I found that I believe the evidence came out that he was not being truthful to Lieutenant Klein when he said that he'd been working on that report the whole time.
Okay.
Okay?
You have...
But I need to go further if I may.
Yes, please.
It's my understanding, and I'd have to consult with the chief on this a little bit, but my understanding is when that was looked at, I don't believe that became part of the July write-up. I believe there was some discussion or some things taken into consideration on, and I won't speak for others, on whether that was, I guess, maliciously, intentionally, or along those lines done to the level to say that, okay, he lied purposely, and that was going to be part of the write-up. In looking at the material, I don't see that present, and I don't think that that information from December 23rd is included, or I don't think that's what's referenced in the July. I think the July, what is referenced is basically the information that was contained in the prior.
Having said that, how is it that the employee is supposed to know that that information is being used if it's not in the write-up? If it's not included in the write-up, he's not made aware of it, how can that be used against him? Will be included as the reason for the charges, because he's not made aware of that.
I'd say in general, when any employee receives one of these personal records entry form with our policies, we sit down, we talk to the employee, we tell them what we believe has occurred. They're given the chance to tell their side of it, so there's a dialogue. So
But it's not documented.
the only documentation would be is if the employee gives new information. A couple things can happen. The employee can give new information that we don't have or didn't have at the time, and we can basically put the process on hold and go back and find out, investigate that information that's given by the employee. Another option is the employee can say whatever they want, and we can decide, okay, we understand what you're saying, we still think there's a problem, but I think as Lieutenant Klein said at the last hearing, once we hear an explanation, we still think you didn't do what you should have done, but we've decided to lower the level of punishment. The third option could be that the employee explains what their position is, and it does not change our mind as far as the discipline that is being issued in the level. I guess the fourth option would be is the employee says nothing, and then there's no dialogue, and we have to just issue what we have because the employee doesn't want to offer anything in their defense one way or the other.
But if that information is being used and it's not documented and the employee does not know about it, how can you use that information against the employee for disciplinary purposes? I mean, why isn't it, if you make reference to an IA, and based on the IA, we find this. None of that is being given to the employee, none of that's being articulated in the personnel records entry form as to why. It's just a blanket statement, it appears, that, well, we conducted an IA and based on interviews, based on all the information we have, you're being untruthful. Now, how does the employee, one, has a right to get that information in an IA that's being used against them for discipline purposes? How is the employee supposed to argue it or agree with it if they don't get that information? Why isn't it being put in here?
Number one, it's not being put in there because this form talks about don't include investigative detail. Number two, if the employee's been through an IA, they know what the questions were, they know what they answered. So it's not something new that they're being hit with. They've been through an IA.
Come on.
They've had the chance to give their side of the story. They've had questions asked. It shouldn't be new to them at that point why they're sitting before us.
Okay, but they don't have an opportunity. How do they have an opportunity to refute those charges if they're not made aware as to what it is that you have against them? How are they, and just because, I'm going to tell you, just because there's something on the form that you use doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. And just because there's something on the form that's being laid out doesn't mean that that's the proper information. So I mean, I'll put that out there. But the question about if you're going to use an internal investigation against an employee, they should be made aware as to what one offered. Did you sign a letter? Excuse me, let me retract that. I take that back. They need to be made aware and have the opportunity to see that information, don't they?
Again, I go back to what Attorney Bailey talked about as far as the procedure that was followed.
And the case law would indicate that, but my understanding.
I guess what I find, and I hate to keep on going back to the same issue, Chief, is that repeatedly we've discussed the fact of your saying that document, and here there's no document. And it's, you know, it's inconsistent. It's inconsistent, you know, for you to feel that you need to document, but then when situations come up like this, that there is no documentation to support that.
I guess our feeling is that we document to the level that we feel we're supposed to in this form, and the backup documentation is what's in the IAs.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to what we talked about here?
On the grievances?
Yes.
No.
Officer Defina, I see by your facial expressions that you perhaps might have something to add.
Yes, ma'am.
Please go ahead.
First, I just want to make it clear, other than the write-up, I've got no information, no documentation as far as the internal investigation. The first day of the hearing, when this conclusion of the internal investigation was passed out, this is the first time I've seen this conclusion here. I think you were both given a copy. It says IA 0901 conclusion at the top.
So you never saw that before?
No. I understand what they're saying, that based on comments, whatever discussion that Lieutenant Klein and I had when I turned the report in on the 19th, the same comments I had on the 23rd, they're saying that spawned an internal investigation. I understand that. Based on what they're saying is new information based on my comments. I understand that. The conclusion doesn't say anything about that. When I turned in the report, when I turned in that report on the 19th, they have the same facts contained within the report that they have July 15th. The fact that they had those facts and they wrote me up and gave me a 5-day suspension, they had all that information, they had those facts. The only thing that the conclusion says here, it doesn't make any mention of now I'm finding out May of 2011 that there was a finding of untruthfulness to a comment I made to Lieutenant Klein. Nowhere in there. It doesn't say it in the conclusion here. This is the conclusion of the internal investigation. It says the charge of failing to truthfully state facts in all reports and forms is sustained. That's based on the date. The one date they're saying that I put on the report. That's the same date that's been on the report since December 19th of 2008. I was given discipline 4 days after I submitted that report. They knew that the date was there. They chose not to discipline me for that date at that time. They're saying they spawned an internal investigation based on a comment I made, yet the IA itself doesn't conclude that that comment was untruthful. So why, in July of '09, 7 months later, I am disciplined for facts that they had in December, the same facts that they had?
Can you help us out with that, Chief? With the question he just posed?
There were numerous issues with Officer Defina that were being worked on by the department's attorney in conjunction with the union attorney. And I believe that's why there is that time frame difference.
Was the attorney doing it on behalf of the Chief of Police and Hooksett Police Department?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead with it.
So that's, I guess, for better or worse, what we have in front of what you have in front of you is what we have. If you don't think we've documented it well enough, we'll take that message from these proceedings. But we believe that I believe that the staff has answered the questions as best as we can, and that what we presented between the information that's in the records form and that gets backed up by the IA, by the IAs, that we do it. I think we do a decent job with it. And I think for an employee to say that they've gone through, if an employee goes through an IA, I don't understand how they can not have some clue when they're getting discipline after that what the IA was not about.
Well, I can appreciate that. If you ask and you conduct an internal investigation on an employee, they're not given all the information that the department or the employer is looking into, the interviews that they're conducting, the paperwork that they're following up, and the like. They're questioned specifically about certain things. I don't know how this investigation, because we don't have the information. And I'm not saying that the investigation was lacking in any way, any shape or form. But what I'm saying is the employee doesn't always know. You don't give them all the facts as to what you're looking into, do you? You don't say that we're looking to charge you with X, Y, and Z, because you may find stuff out that the employee is going to give up during an internal investigation that may lead to more charges, correct?
Then the employee, when they get this form, if they don't agree, they then follow whatever steps are, either whether they're union or non-union, they follow the steps to move forward and get the information.
You're saying requesting the IA?
Right, the same way Attorney Bailey laid out the process has been done in the past. And they basically disagree and using the process fight the entry form.
But hasn't always been the process that nobody gets copies of their IA?
Unless they request them through the proper channels, and then as Attorney Bailey talked about, that has occurred.
Let me make sure I get this straight. So you're saying that past practice has been that if an employee requests a copy of the internal investigation that was done on them, that they would get copies of that?
Usually what happens, if I can clarify, going back to what Attorney Bailey wrote, my understanding of that is that if the employee was to tell, say, their union attorney that...
Let's assume they're non-union. Let's assume they're not affiliated.
Right, so...
And they received discipline, and they requested an internal affairs, copy of their internal affairs.
Right.
Would they get that, or would they not get that?
They probably would get that basically, they would get that basically under the same format, if you will, of getting the parts that they need. I mean, again, I go back to what Attorney Bailey has said has been the, for better or worse, has been the practice that we followed for years.
Well, I have some recollection of something not too distant that is to the contrary, so we'll move on. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to respond to what the chief just said. In 2002, I asked him specifically for an internal investigation and to find out which detective completed the investigation and who gave the findings. The chief told me I would have to sue the department, sit in front of a jury of 12, let them know that I was a liar to get the detective on the stand, then I could ask him. Absolutely, that's what he said to me back then. It was 2002. I asked him for a copy of the IA and to find out which detective, even just which detective concluded the internal investigation. He said I'd have to sue them for it.
That's what I would correct. All right.
I think that basically is the end of the questions that we have. I guess I would look to both the chief and to Officer Defina. If you have any closing statements or any statements you would like to make at this point to wrap it up, if you would. Go ahead, Chief.
As I said, I think the staff has laid out what the issues were, what the concerns were, how we came to the conclusions that we came to, how we decided on the levels of discipline that were issued. I think we followed a process that was fair, and I think that in the end, if the goal of the staff is to make sure that we're providing proper police services. And I think that these write-ups show that we do not feel that Officer Defina's behavior and performance, if you will, was providing proper police services, that an officer, at least with his time on and the training he had as a school resource officer, was appropriate for the situation. And I will just, again, lay out to you that there were other issues going on involving this officer that attorneys from both sides were working on. I'm not privy to those discussions. So there's a certain level of information we don't have.
Then don't include that. If you don't have any knowledge of that, then don't include that in your closing, because that would lead us to believe that there's something going on, but you can't articulate.
No, I'm not saying that it was going on, is going on, was going on, and would play into the questions you have about dates.
Okay, but...
Well, we can't consider that. We can't consider that because we don't...
I mean, whatever's happened between the attorneys, you're not privy to, and we certainly are not privy to it, so how can we consider that?
You can't, and I'm just telling you in the closing that the reason that some of the questions you have, that's why we can't answer those questions. But I think we've answered, I think all the staff members you've heard in 2 nights of hearing have answered what their positions were, what their thoughts were about the rules and regulations and proper police procedures, where they felt that Officer Defina was deficient, and that they felt, regardless of what anybody else thinks, that they felt that they were fair, that we were following a proper procedure to look at how we were performing or not performing our job and deal with it. Thank you.
Officer Defina.
I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I'd just like to hit upon a few things that were said here tonight. First off, step 3, Chief stated tonight that step 3 is just filing with the commission. I've had numerous conversations about him, with him about this. He has personally explained to me, step 3 is the hearing with the commission.
Who is he?
The chief. The chief and I have had conversations, many conversations about this. He's made it clear that step 3 is the hearing in front of the commission, not just handing a piece of paper to the commission, not filing. Step 4 is not the step in front of the commission. Step 3. We've both discussed this. He's the one that taught me. The fact that step 3 is just filing today, that was said, that's not the information that I got from him. I'd like to hit upon the point. In the final report, I know there was some discussion about the actual report that was done between the two students of different color. It says right in the completed and final report that the one student swung, he ducked, and the other one hit him. It was a mutual combat. If you read the facts, it states right in. At no time was that report listed as a hate crime. It came in as a threatening report, safe school report threatening. When the student came to me to tell me about what was on MySpace, he was concerned because the other student was threatening to fight him at the bus stop. Not about the racial issue. This was about the bus stop. These two students were former friends. This was not a race issue. At no time was a report stating that it was a race issue. If you look at the completed report, after the detectives got to interview both parties, the one student actually wrote a letter saying he was sorry for making the comments on MySpace. This wasn't a racially motivated thing. I just want to make that clear. Another thing that was said tonight that really bothered me, on the December 23rd write-up, the 5-day suspension. When that went to hearing, during the hearing, I brought up the fact that untruthfulness is a serious issue. The fact that, in my opinion, they snuck it on page 2 and hid it was disturbing to me. If it was if they're saying, like they alleged in the complaint, that I was untruthful, why was there no internal investigations completed and started because of that? If they had, they would have been able to secure those tapes. They would have taken, like I have here, the actual minutes of the police commission meeting, which all the facts that surrounded that proved that I was telling the truth and they weren't. Yet there was no internal investigation completed on that. And all of a sudden, a month earlier, Francine had told us the tapes are destroyed when they're recorded over at a new commission meeting. There had been no meeting in between that point, and the tapes were destroyed.
Can you give us those minutes?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. There's video of the meeting also, which shows that I brought up the question on page 2. I brought this up with the commission's own. This is from the commission improvements. The chief asked the current school resource officer meeting if there had been problems in the schools that had been portrayed to them. I clearly said to the chief, I don't understand what you're saying. And he came back and had no comment in response. No comment. Yet the write-up you see, which is signed by both Lieutenant Klein and the chief, shows differently. I brought that to the commission, and the fact that the tapes have been destroyed, there was no evidence that this
December
was
16th. Okay.
What Commissioner Roy came back and said was because there was confusion, they were just going to let it go and take away the truthfulness and give me 2 days back.
And that was the reason for the lowering from the 5 to the 2.5 days?
That was what Commissioner Roy had said, because there was
Okay.
confusion on both parts, although there wasn't. It was clear and in writing.
Wait a minute, are you saying that in the December
23rd.
23rd, when that was heard in front of the commission, what, in April? Or
Yes.
sometime next spring?
Yes.
Do you say that they did away with the truthfulness portion of it?
When that was the understanding from our attorneys. They clarified at the end of the meeting when Commissioner Roy said there's confusion on both sides as to what was actually asked, yet there wasn't. It was right there in writing. They said, we're going to give you back 2.5 days.
Okay. But
Yeah.
did they strike?
They never removed it from my file. Never removed it from my file. It's still there, which I brought up in front of the commission again, and the That was back when I went in front of them before I was fired.
But they didn't eliminate one of the charges. They just lowered the discipline for the same charges, those charges listed.
They basically just they paid me for 2.5 days back. They never changed anything in my file as far as the paperwork goes.
Okay, so is this the only entry form that's in his personnel file for December 23rd, 08 that shows 5-day suspension? Do we know?
I don't know offhand, I don't have his personnel file in front of me.
Does anybody know if that 5-day suspension was lowered?
It was to 2.5 days.
Okay, but is there anything on the personnel records form that shows that it was heard and that it was lowered? Is there an
I don't
entry
recall.
form made?
I don't recall.
Typically, if an employee goes in front of the commission and there's a change to what is recommended, is there another updated personnel records entry form or a revised personnel records entry form that shows what had happened in front of the commission, if they upped it, if they lowered it, or they maintained it the same? Is there any record of that? Or is this the only thing that gets put in the employee's record, and that there's nothing that shows that it was adjudicated, if you will, either kept the same, lowered, or dismissed, or whatever?
I can't tell you right now, I'd have to look.
What would be the common practice? Wouldn't that be the, in other words, let's say this one here went in front of the commission and they said, not guilty on everything, we dropped everything.
In the best,
Does this get removed?
the best case, I'm sorry, if it was dropped, if suspension was dropped, in the best case, it should be noted on that, and then with just some note next to it, like see the commission minutes or something like that, and then somebody would be able to go back to those minutes where the commission heard whatever and made the change of decision.
But where it was dropped, where it was reduced, not dropped, reduced, would there have been a notation to that extent?
In the best of world, it should be. I can't tell you right now whether there is or not on that one.
Well, not for this particular one, I understand that, but it's a general question, that if a personnel records entry form is entered on behalf of an employee for disciplinary purposes, and it gets changed, if the discipline gets changed, if it either gets dropped, changed, moved up, lowered, whatever direction it goes in, or sustained, minus the sustained, does that become part of the employee's personnel record, that this was changed, as opposed to see commission minutes, and left at that, where now somebody has to go over another course to go and find out what did the commission say?
It would, in the best world, there would be a change to that form, and it probably would say, just see commission minutes, because if that employee had their hearing in non-public, we wouldn't attach the public minutes to that. So no, we wouldn't normally attach the minutes. We would just refer back to what that proceeding was, and if somebody backtracked, they would get the minutes of that proceeding.
All right, but when the employee makes an annual request for their employee file, personnel file, there's nothing in there that would show that it got changed, that it was lowered, that it was...
Again, in a perfect world, it would show on that form.
That's what I'm asking, is another form, or is there...
No, it should show, in a perfect world, it would show on that form, just as when Lieutenant Klein had originally, on 0906, had made a recommendation, and then it was changed, and it was initialed, so...
So that's the only notation that would be...
That was probably what would happen.
If I could, the copy that you have, I made from my current personnel file. That's what's in my current personnel file. If it had been altered or changed, I would assume that would have been in there also.
Well, this is the one that shows a suspension 5 days.
Yes.
Is there a personnel entry records form that shows that he grieved it and went in front of the commission and they lowered it, the one he's talking about, lowered it down to 2.5 days? There's something in his
I
personnel?
can't tell you, I don't know.
There should be, right?
There should be some entry on that form probably in the file.
Goes back to what you said, document, document, document.
There should be, because that would give the appearance, if he were to look at it, or somebody else were to look at it, if the employee signed off on another employer looking at his personnel file, it would show 5-day suspension, and it wouldn't show that it was down to 2.5 after he agreed. That's my concern is, you know, we talk about a perfect world, but we also have to talk about the world of HPD and what we do, you know, and the way we do it, so, okay. I apologize, I think you were.
Yeah, you had the floor.
Yeah.
I'd also like to address an issue here. I've got in my hand a conclusion of the internal investigation. Nowhere on here does it speak of a finding, which I just heard tonight, that there was a finding of untruthful with the comment that I made to the lieutenant.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Okay. What I heard here tonight was that the internal investigation found that there was, that I was untruthful with the comment that I made to the lieutenant. That's what I heard from their side.
That's my understanding.
Nowhere on the conclusion of the internal investigation does it say that. If they're saying it's a finding of it, how is it not on the conclusion? The conclusion's supposed to state whether it was sustained, unsustained. If there's a memo submitted saying, based on a comment I made to Lieutenant Klein, we're going to initiate an internal investigation. If that was a complaint, the conclusion is supposed to state whether it's sustained or unsustained. And nowhere on the conclusion does it state that it was sustained, that there was any mention of that whatsoever. But now I'm being told, if you read the 100 or so pages in there, it does.
Hey, I want to clarify, Captain, if I have it again here. Is that accurate for me? Would it be accurate to believe that based on the statements that were made by the employee to Lieutenant Klein on the day that he received the December 23rd action form, the personnel action form, based on that is what started the investigation, because the lieutenant believed he was lying? And that's where his report or memorandum came down the chain, or up the chain, if you will, excuse me, to conduct an IA?
There was other information in that memo from Lieutenant Klein that was looked into in the IA as well. When you asked what was new, there was old stuff that was on there. The new thing was from the December 23rd conversation. There was old stuff on there, like the submission of the reports, the difference with the dates, why the 4 different dates, those type of things that were discussed. The new information was from December 23rd.
Okay, that old information was used in the discipline of the December 23rd discipline, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that was used, that was taken care of December 23rd. He was issued the personnel records entry form for the suspension, right?
Correct.
But then there's another issue that came up based on the conversation that the employee had with Lieutenant, that got new information, and that was looked into? That
It
new
was.
information about him being untruthful?
It was part of the whole thing, yes. Yes.
So the IA included stuff from prior to December 23rd's record entry form discipline?
That is correct.
Continue.
I'd just like to touch upon the 0906. If I could read this briefly. This is in regards to the fake drugs. Standard operating procedure P250, development of discipline, which was handed out. We all got that the first night. Clearly states corrective action should be designed to correct deficient performance. The discipline imposed should successfully remediate the employee and encourage him to perform at an acceptable level. Detective Sergeant Dupuy's memo, which we've gone over plenty of times, to Lieutenant Klein, clearly brings into question my investigation skills and my knowledge of specific drug laws. A 2-day suspension containing no remedial training regarding the specific drug laws or any additional training or schooling on proper investigation techniques is in no way designed to correct deficient performance or remediate or encourage the employee to any degree. The only thing discipline of this kind does is punish. Issuing a 2-day suspension for this offense without any focus on retraining is actually a violation of their own policy P250. Corrective action in this agency has gone from a means to remediate to straight up discipline, often with no consideration on improving job performance. I feel that this personal record entry form, whether it contains a 2-day suspension or as it was lowered to a verbal reprimand, still fails to conform with our standard operating procedures on the development of discipline. I'd like to again state for the record the fact that after taking into account from the SRO at the time of the incident, all of his knowledge of the situation and the parties involved, at no time was an actual crime committed. I just want to get that out there again. As far as As far as 0907, I just want to reiterate that to the Commission, I was truthful throughout the internal investigation. I gave my explanations of why I had done what I did, and at no time did I try to purposely mislead anyone with the work that I had produced. If I wanted to give impressions that an incident had taken place at a time other than when it did, I could have simply dated all the materials the same. This was not the case. During the hearing, we heard the Chief himself state that he read the whole IA more than once, and he, and I quote, didn't believe that the conclusion of the IA was that he knowingly did not tell the truth, but that he was very confused as far as what he was supposed to be doing and what was required for reports. We also heard the Chief state, and I quote, that at face value you look at these issues and the department has certain concerns, but in talking to the officer, or in the second case, reviewing the IA, you realize that there may be some misunderstandings on the officer's part, or what he's supposed to be doing, along with maybe outside influences that he talked about that made him act the way he did. Combined with the fact that on December 23rd, 2008, I was given a 5-day suspension for the same incident that I'm grieving tonight from the July 15th. 2008 write-up stated, your neglect to report the assault in a timely manner is a direct violation of submitting reports, truthfulness, neglect of duty, which is exactly what's on the other one with the conclusion of the IA, failing to truthfully, failing to properly, accurately submit all reports and forms required. Sustained is the same within. 4 days after I submitted my report, it was reviewed and I was given the 5-day suspension because of it. I don't think it's fair to come back 7 months later, reissue discipline based on the same report that had been reviewed by my supervisors. And just one last thing. This entire incident was based on what had happened on December 11th. There was a felony level incident. It is not the same as a mutual combat between students or even an assault between students. This was a felony that was spreading through Collier Middle School. I was ordered to leave the school. In my opinion, that was criminal in itself. The fact that I was ordered to walk away from that school. No other officer came to relieve me at the school. No detective came to relieve me. No one else was even notified. That was it. I walked away from the school, and the principal, the school personnel could not believe that we just abandoned them. So if you want to turn around and talk about incompetence or neglect of duty, I've never been part of something so shocking. That's it. That's all.
Lieutenant Klein, I have to ask you a question on the heels of what his argument is. The day that he left that school, were you made aware about that texting issue? Were you aware of what was going on about the texting issue?
I was aware of the texting issue. I was not aware of the fight.
Okay. And still being aware of the texting issue, you were still ordered not to continue working, but to leave.
Everything had been passed up for detectives as far as I was concerned, and I was told and ordered by my boss to tell him to leave.
All right. What do you mean everything was passed up to detectives?
The detectives were well aware.
Reporting it?
The detectives were well aware of what was going on, and
How did they find out?
When he called Detective Sergeant Benatti.
So, detectives were now in charge of that investigation?
As far as I'm concerned, they were aware of it. I was ordered to order Officer Defina to leave at that point.
And I appreciate that, and I'm not holding you at fault for following orders?
I was aware of the texting issue, yes.
Okay.
When he was work leave.
And the department was aware of it, and detectives were made aware of it through whom? Who notified detectives?
Officer Defina
Did you notify?
notified Detective Sergeant Panardi, if I can finish.
Panardi? Okay, that's how.
Notified Detective Sergeant Panardi of that case
Right.
because myself and Captain Cecilia were sitting on some oral boards.
Understood.
There's also, at that time, there was a sergeant on duty that could have been notified.
Okay, so it was out of his hands? He passed
He
it,
notified it to the Detective Sergeant Panardi.
and he notified you of it?
I got the information through Detective Sergeant Panardi, yes.
So you didn't get it to him?
No. Detective Sergeant
But
Panardi
when
gave me
you
the
came in,
information.
you were aware that it already
Yes.
occurred?
Yes.
Can I follow up on that? Lieutenant Klein, when he was asked to leave the school by you because you said there was no overtime or whatever, did you feel as though the situation had either resolved itself or you felt that it was handled and there was no more to be done on that? Or why did you tell him to leave if it was such a serious situation? He's calling it a felony.
Okay, I'm not gonna minimize two punches to another student's face, as he will, as far as a mutual combat. I'm not gonna minimize that. That is an assault, and it is required under the memorandum of agreement.
I'm asking you about the other.
I understand, I
Okay.
understand. Yes, ma'am, I'm leading up to that.
Sorry, I apologize. Go ahead.
Again, I'm not gonna minimize that. I'm being given an order, I'm gonna relay that order. That's what I'm told to do. He is going to leave now. That's going to be handled by detectives. That was my understanding at the time I gave him that order.
But it was excuse me if I might finish, but it was considered a felony. Didn't you consider that serious enough that he should finish or do whatever needs to be done to follow up? And that's a pretty serious issue if you read what.
And that decision had been made. May I?
Didn't you intercede with one of your supervisors about the seriousness of that type of crime?
That information, I was told by my supervisor to instruct him to leave. I'm not going to look at my supervisor and say no.
Who's that?
Captain Cilio.
But did you explain to him what kind of a situation?
He knew the situation that was going on.
Captain Cecilio, if you would.
I'd like to know why you ordered him to leave.
Sergeant Bernardi came in, we were both in the oral boards. At that time, the incident was not ongoing. You have a felony sexting case among juveniles, okay? Juveniles that are sending a picture amongst each other in the group.
Video.
The chances of those juveniles being charged with a felony for that type of incident was slim and none.
According to whom?
We had it in the past. We had a similar incident, not a video, but pictures of kids taking pictures of themselves and sending it throughout the school.
But why was the Attorney General's office involved with this if it wasn't so serious?
We asked them to do we asked them to come on board. We tried to follow the same thing that Salem had done. But the charges also, if you look at even the Salem case and our case, we filed no charges.
Well, what was the sexting about?
It was a video of a student that was of their private parts sent to another student, which was now being sent to all the students.
And that's not serious?
It is serious, very serious. And we took it seriously, and we sent detectives to handle the case. However, we were going to have Officer Defina do the case.
That's not,
Did you send which two detectives?
Detective Sergeant Panardi was told to get the detectives and have them handle it.
And they went down to school?
I don't know if they went down to school. I don't think so, because the first time once we got out of there, Jason was already back at the station. The school was over. School day was over by the time we found out about it.
Wasn't the assault over?
Assault was also over, but we were never advised of the assault either. Otherwise, we would have sent more detectives.
Well, it seems like to me that there was a prioritizing going on that, according to what I've heard, that the assault held more priority
No.
than the other.
The assault we didn't even know about. The sexting was our priority at that point, getting detectives actively involved in that case.
So
They would handle that case. It wouldn't be a case, as Jason already said, he was over his head.
Okay.
I didn't say I was over my head. I didn't make that comment.
That's fine. That was investigated, you're telling me that that was the start of the investigation, started before he got back? Before he came back from the school, or when he got back from the school?
I didn't see him until I left the oral boards. He was already back at the station.
Okay, but when did this investigation start on the 16th?
I have no idea.
Okay, there must be-
I wasn't informed until Sergeant Panati came in.
There's got to be police reports noted that day then.
There should be a lot of reports on that case, yes.
For that day, somebody would have had to said, we received this information about this, and this is where we're going with it.
Correct.
Is that the way you understand it, Lieutenant Klein?
There would be a report, yes.
They were doing it.
There
They
would be
were
a
working
report.
it.
So you asked him or told him to leave because you said he was, or you felt that he wasn't qualified to do the sexting case?
SROs would do the preliminary investigation. He would kick off the report. At this level, it would go to detectives. It's a felony level case.
Okay, so he would to do the report, the SROs to do the initial investigation, collecting of information, so it can get past the detectives.
Get the basics so we can get a detective.
Get the ball rolling.
Correct.
Was he afforded the opportunity that day to finish or do a report? Did you do a report that day?
I did not.
Why, he wasn't given that opportunity, he was just sent home, and now we'll let detectives take over?
The sent home was,
No overtime.
I understand that, and I'm trying to explain that. What happened, Commissioner, is you have a brief conversation because he contacted Detective Sergeant Panardi, who came into the room when we were in between. I believe we had one more kid up to do. He said, this is what we got going on. And I said, well, get some detectives down there and get going on it.
Okay.
We finished our thing. When I came out, he was sitting in the patrol room, and it's like, what is he still doing?
Okay. How are they supposed to
And
follow?
then I went
How are they
upstairs.
supposed to follow up? How are they supposed to start an investigation if they don't have the information from the responding officer?
They had already had some conversation with him, with what my understanding, and Detective Sergeant Panardi was giving me enough information
Okay.
to determine that, hey, look, you need to kick this off, and somebody needs to get down there and start
Who
running.
filled out the initial one-on-one?
That would be, the initial 101 was done after the fact, I believe, by Jason.
But it was done after the fact, for no fault of his own, correct? Because he was
Correct.
told no overtime.
Correct? And he,
So he had to do the report. When did you do the report?
Did it at my house the next day.
next day.
When did it get submitted?
I'm guessing the first day I was back to work.
Were you going
maybe
on
I was on vacation. I was on vacation, and I think I had a couple of vacation days, maybe a 3-4 day weekend. So I wasn't back to work until Monday.
Just to follow up again on this and how this works, because I'm not really up to speed probably on that type of thing. But when somebody takes a report or is working on it, so to speak, don't you wait for the other two or the other person who's going to work on the investigation? Don't you wait for them to get there before you just leave? Is that the way it works, or?
I'm not clear what you're asking.
When we're talking about the sexting
Yeah.
issue, okay, and he has a conversation with Detective Sergeant Panardi, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and isn't it normal for when you're going to do an investigation on something like that, that the person is there until the two, or whoever is going to replace them or is going to be involved in the investigation gets there so that they can give them the information? Why is a person asked to leave and they go down there and they don't have anything to base themselves on? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And it
Okay.
depends on the facts and circumstances you have at that time.
Oh, so
If you have people that interview, the detectives would interview them. If there's evidence to collect, they would collect evidence. It depends on the facts and circumstances they had at the time. The facts and circumstances I got in the oral boards was, this is the case that's going on. He's still there. And it was, get down there and get people to start working. That somehow translates to, you go home and get out of the station. is a translation that it wasn't, you tell him to get out of here, you tell him to go home. That's not what happened. It was, you need to get this done, get working on it.
Okay, wait a minute.
I haven't,
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to put you guys at odds here, but I'm hearing one thing from one witness that says the order comes from up above, and I'm going to obey that order. You are to
the order was no overtime. They didn't want any overtime
Is that
in
correct?
expect.
I-
That's a blanket order.
I understand that, but I understood it correctly, Lieutenant?
No overtime.
No overtime,
You need to
yes,
leave now.
no. Right? And he's to leave. Okay. Now you're telling, if I understand what you're saying is, it's somehow lost in translation that you have to leave.
The problem, and I agree with you with something you brought up earlier, was nobody can volunteer their time. They have to be paid. Believe me, I would love it if the guys finished up their reports at the end of the day and I didn't have to pay them.
All right, how about these?
But that doesn't happen.
Isn't there comp time? Don't we get comp time? Instead of putting in for overtime, they put in for earned time?
It doesn't happen. Even the earned time is considered overtime. They're not allowed to work.
That's their choice.
Oh, I understand that's their choice, but that's an avenue that they could do.
They can, but we can't tell them,
You
you know,
have to take earned time.
you have to take earned time.
I understand that.
Even now, Commissioner, I get questioned on the overtime that
I
I use.
understand. I have a question, Captain Daigle, reference the IA. Is Sergeant Finardi, he was interviewed in this IA?
Yes, he was.
All right. Does he corroborate anything that Officer Defina said about the situation? About investigations, overtime, being called by him, being advised what's going on? Does he corroborate that in the internal?
I guess before I answer you, I would ask respectively, can I speak to what Sergeant Bernardi said in an IA if he's not here to give his blessing for that? That was discussed during the first hearing, and I think that was ruled that we shouldn't go there. But I have no problem doing it as long as we're allowed to go there.
I think if it's an internal investigation, it's documented, and it should have been given to the employee, and it's used as part of the discipline. If an interview is done by someone at the police department that's doing the IA, I would have full trust that they translated exactly what the sergeant or witness said onto paper to be used in the IA. So if we want to get a legal opinion on it, we can, but that information should have been made aware to both him, the employee, and the commission, so we can make these decisions. But you can either, in general terms, say, yes, he corroborated, or no, he didn't. It differed. Or there was other information that contradicts what's being said. I mean,
I believe he corroborated that information.
So he corroborated that information that Officer Defina.
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
If I could interject real quick. When Detective Bernardi called me the next day, the day after the incident, this would be the 12th when I was at home, that was the first time he told me that now this was his case and he was in charge of it. The day before, he was just playing liaison. He's not in my chain of command, he's not even into my division, so he was just the only person I could contact to get word back and forth to the lieutenant and captain what I was dealing with.
Okay, and he's not here for us to question him, so
He's not.
we have to take
Okay.
certain things into account.
But one thing I would like to say, because I think it's important, the school's concern, my concern, was to prevent this information, this video, getting in the hands of juveniles. That was extremely important for the parents that knew and the school. You can see by the report that the Hooksett Police Department detectives that they didn't interview the victim until 7 days after the incident was reported and didn't interview the suspect until 13 days after the incident was reported.
Is that accurate, Captain?
It's taken directly from the reports.
Captain, is that accurate?
I don't know, it could be.
So it's very possible that the report he's referring to is accurate. If that's, who did the report?
I submitted some of it. I believe Detective Bernardi, I actually might have the report here if you give me a second.
It doesn't, I don't.
So you're saying that in this circumstance, with regard to interviewing anyone in the sexting issues, they didn't occur until 7 days or even 13 days? Is that what you said?
The victim who
Yes,
made the
victim.
video, that was 7 days.
Yeah.
And the first boy that she'd sent it to was 13 days. And from there, it spread.
And we've already had the testimony about the ice storm. How many days was the ice storm?
It was about 4, I think, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. About 4, possibly
So-
5.
So the ice storm, so you couldn't do it because of the ice
And
storm?
the weekend.
Huh?
And the weekend. I'm just putting
Okay.
some of the other facts into
Okay,
your
some of the
time
factors.
frame.
Both
There were other things in the world going on besides, that could play into the reason why there's a delay.
Both suspect and victim lived in town.
All right.
So
don't
I would
wanna
suggest
debate-
you review the
I
report.
don't want to debate and make more inquiries about the specific incidents. The reason that I was asking is to determine, was some of these facts used in the second discipline? And I think we got a pretty clear answer on that. And that was why I was going in the correct direction.
Do you have anything more to add?
I believe that's it for now. That's it.
Take 5
It's just really important to the deliberation.
Once again, thank you, and I appreciate that of your patience. I guess Commissioner Brolian, we're at the point of deliberation here right now. There was quite a bit of information given on both sessions, Part 1 and Part 2. I don't know if I'm able at this point to be able to not only deliberate, but have all this information so that I'm able to come to a decision. And I don't know about you, what your feeling is with regard to this.
Yeah, no, I think at this point, need to review it, review what we've heard tonight, review what we've heard in the first one, and on our own. But I'd like to start deliberation at another meeting, and I'd like to know if we can do it on the date of our regularly scheduled meeting. I don't know if that's going to be acceptable or not, as opposed to setting aside a separate day like we did today to go into Part 3 for deliberations.
Well, my only concern with regard to that is if you are saying that you want to do it, are you saying for the next scheduled meeting that the commission has?
On the 17th? I don't know.
We don't know how long the deliberation is going to take, and is it all possible to do it on another evening?
$16?
Is that possible? Because like I said, I think having it combined or before the regular commission meeting, the meetings tend in themselves to be long, and to add that to it, I think we're going to be going into the very late hours that evening. So that's my concern. I don't know. Are you able to do it on, that's That's the Tuesday, the Monday, are you able to do it on the Monday?
Why don't we shoot for Monday the 16th?
The only, I'm not gonna say issue, but the only concern I have is whether or not this room is gonna be available, but if it's not, we can find another location. I don't think we're gonna have to have,
Large venue?
well, it's basically our deliberation and not anything else.
Right.
That's the only thing that I believe I heard that either the planning board or whoever it is has upcoming meetings. And it was available this evening because they had no meeting planned, but I believe they have meetings planned for at least the end of the month and probably even before that.
All right. Is there someplace else that, I mean, a location to be announced here, or is that what?
Yeah, probably we could possibly go to the library,
Okay.
the Hooksett Library. Can see if we can get a room. Chief?
What we'll do is obviously we'll tell Francine tomorrow, because she has to post the meeting, and we'll find out tomorrow whether this room is available or the library or what.
Okay,
There's also a training room at the police, safety complex that might be available also.
Or is
Okay.
that considerably larger?
And, right, yeah, then the meeting room, yes.
What do we do with that?
Well, I'm not sure if fire department has any training scheduled.
they would need to check with the...
But yeah, but I mean, tomorrow we'll start with the posting and locations.
Yeah, well, do you want to make the first preference the police department?
That's fine,
The safety center?
right?
Why don't we, yeah, make that first preference at the safety center?
If you're not able to accommodate that, I guess we'd either look to this building or to the Hooksett Public Library. But Monday, the 16th,
5:30?
5:30.
And that's when we'll start our deliberations.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
The